Hey, good morning. It's time for another morning devotion. We're working our way through the book of Mark. Today we're in chapter 14. It's pretty lengthy, so we're just going to go ahead and jump in here. Um, Verse 1 and 2, the plot of the priest. At verse 1, after 2 days was the feast of the Passover and the unleavened bread. The chief priests and the scribes sought how they might take him, Jesus, by craft and put him to death. But they said, not on a feast day, lest there be an uproar of the people. All right, so the time they're talking about is the Passover feast. There was going to be a lamb slain as a Passover lamb that would roll the sins of Israel forward 1 year. Jesus actually dies as our Passover lamb that removes our sins permanently. The Pharisees and the rulers went to a secret place plotting to kill Jesus. Caiaphas, the high priest, counseled, it's better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish. And the original plan was to kill Jesus, but not on a feast day. However, Judas actually helped move this plan up, and these plans would rapidly change, and Jesus did die on Passover. Um, and being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, as Jesus said to me, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious. She brake the box and poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation within themselves and said, why was this waste of the ointment made? For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence and given to the poor. And they murmured against her, and Jesus said, let her alone. Why trouble her? She hath wrought a good work on me. For you have the poor with you always, and whensoever you will, you may do good. But you don't have me always. So hath she done what she could. She has come aforehand to anoint my body for the burying. Verily I say unto you, wherever this gospel shall be preached throughout the world, this also shall be done. This also that she hath done shall be spoken of for a memorial of her. So after a strenuous day of controversy in Jerusalem, Jesus goes to Bethany. He's entertained at the home of Simon the leper. While they're eating, Mary entered and anointed the head and the feet of Jesus. She had an alabaster box full of ointment that was around a year's wages worth of work. It was very uncommon for the heads of rabbis to be, and it was not uncommon for the heads of rabbis to be anointed, but the issue was not the amount, but the issue was the type and the cost of the oil. She did not just anoint his head, but she also anointed his feet. Matthew said the disciples had indignation. Mark said some of them present were indignant. John records that Judas, the treasurer, said, why was this perfume sold and the money not given to the poor? It was a year's wages. Jesus responds, you have the poor with you always, but not me, and tells them that this act was done to prepare for the body for burial. Whenever the gospel's preached in the world, let this story be told. It was that important to Jesus. And Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went out to the chief priest to betray him. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And he sought how he might conveniently betray him. So while the 12 may have felt the sting of Jesus' rebuke, the 11 accepted it quietly. Judas, however, was moved to action. Luke said that Satan entered Judas. The word enter means to take control. Judas offered, think of it like you're not home and a thief breaks in your home. He now has control over everything in your home. Judas offered change of the timetable to the Sanhedrin. The worry of the Passover is not a concern anymore. Judas would now be given 30 pieces of silver, the price of a common slave, in exchange for Jesus. And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said to him, where wilt thou go to prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? And he sendeth forth 2 of his disciples and said to them, go into the city, and there shall meet a man bringing a pitcher of water. Follow him. And whenever he goes in, you say to the good men of the house, the master said, where is thy guest chamber? Where shall I eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room, furnished and prepared, there made ready for us. His disciples went forth and came into the city and found as he said unto them, and they made ready the Passover. And in the evening he cometh with the 12. They sat down and ate. Jesus said, verily I say to you, one of you which eateth with me shall betray me. And they began to be sorrowful, and to say one unto the other, is it I? And another said, Is it I? And he answered and said to them, It is one of the 12 that dippeth his hand with me in the dish. The Son of Man indeed goeth, as is written of him, but woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. Good were it for that man if he had never been born. The day had arrived for the preparation of the Passover feast. Jesus selected Peter and John and entrusted them with the responsibility of preparation. A blast from the silver trumpets blow in the temple, announcing to all Jerusalem that the Passover had arrived. That hour found Jesus and his apostles reclining at the table that was prepared. Jesus quoted Psalms 41:9, Yea, mine own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which I did eat my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me. One by one they asked if it was them, and Jesus said, It's the one who dips his hand with me in the dish. Jesus speaks to Judas, what you're doing, do quickly. And Judas, the one who will betray Jesus, leaves the room. And as they did eat, Jesus took the bread and blessed and brake it and gave to them and said, Take, eat, this is my body. Takes a drink, cup, gives thanks. And whenever he gave to them, they all drank it. And he said, This is the blood of the New Testament, which was shed for many. Verily I say unto you, I will drink no more of the fruit of the vine until the day that I drink it new in the kingdom of God. And when they had sung a hymn, they went to the Mount of Olives. Bread and wine were very symbolic in ancient Israel. The bread was a sign of God's provision. The wine was a sign of joy and celebration. Jesus attached these new symbols to these items, saying this body and bread. Luke records that he said, Do this in remembrance of me. The purpose of these items is now to remember him. Remember his broken body on the cross. Remember the blood that was shed on the cross. Remember, don't forget to remember the blood. Don't forget to remember his body. Jesus said unto them, All you will be offended for me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. And after that I've risen, I will go before you into Galilee. But Peter said to him, Although all shall be offended, not me. And Jesus said to him, Verily I say to you that this day, even this night, before the cock crow twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he spake more vehemently, If I should die with thee, I will not die thee in any wise. Likewise also said they all. Jesus just revealed to one of them that they would betray him. Now he predicts that the other 11 would deny him. He viewed this denial as a fulfillment of Zechariah 13:7. Peter professed his willingness to not only go to prison, but to die with Christ. Peter did not know his own weaknesses, but Jesus told him how he would fulfill his own prediction. And a few hours later, Peter would. They came to a place that was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, Sit here while I pray. And he taketh with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be sore amazed and very heavy, and saith to them, My soul is exceedingly sorrowful to death. Wait here and watch. And they went a little further and fell on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me, nevertheless, not what I will, but thou wilt. And he cometh and findeth them sleeping, and saith unto Peter, Simon, thou sleepest thou? Couldst thou not watch me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away and prayed and spake the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, neither wist that they want to answer him. And he cometh a third time and said to them, Sleep on now, take your rest, it is enough, the hour is come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed in the hands of sinners. Rise up, let us go. He that betrayeth me is at hand. Jesus must have endured the most difficult moment in the garden. He's deeply distressed and troubled. His sweat becomes like blood. In his time of dire need, his 12 followers drifted to sleep twice. They had no idea how critical this night was. Instead of screaming at them in anguish, he encouraged them to pray for themselves. Even though he had every right to demand better performance, he felt compassion for them and gave them direction. He wanted them to stay protected from temptation. His sense of responsibility and concern overcame his preoccupation with the cross. His date with destiny did not overshadow his love for his weak and sleepy team. In the garden, he provided us with the ultimate display of responsibility. He cared for his disciples even in the midst of a crisis. And immediately, whenever he yet spake, cometh Judas, one of the 12, and with a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. And he that betrayed him had given unto them a token, saying, Whoever I kiss, the same is he. Take him and lead him away safely. And as soon as he was come, he goeth straightway to him and saith, Master, Master, and kissed him. And they laid their hands on him and took him. And one of them that stood by drew a sword and smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus answered and said, Are you come against me as a thief with swords and with staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you took me not, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. They forsook him and fled, and there followed him a certain young man having a linen cloth cast about his naked body. And the young man laid hold on him, and he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. So Jesus calls Judas friend. This is not the first time Jesus uses the word friend. The other is when a friend shows up at the wedding without the proper garment. Just because Jesus calls you friend doesn't mean everything's okay. Peter cuts off the servant's ear. Jesus puts it back on. Jesus reminds them that all this has to be done. It was a fulfillment of prophecy. He is arrested, led to Caiaphas, the high priest, and the young man who fled naked is believed to be the author of this book, John Mark. And they led Jesus away, and the high priest, and with him were assembled the chief priests and the elders and the scribes. And Peter followed afar off, even up to the palace of the high priest, and he sat there with the servants and warmed himself against the fire. The chief priests and all the council sought for witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. For many bare false witness against him, but their witness agreed not together. And there arose certain and bare false witness against him, saying, We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. But neither so did their witness agree together. The high priest stood in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, Answerest thou nothing? What is this, these witnesses against thee? But he held his peace, and he answered nothing. Again the high priest asked him and said, Art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes and said, What need we any further witness? You have heard the blasphemy. What think ye? And they all condemned him to guilty of death. And some began to spit on him, to cover his face, and to buffet him, and say to him, Prophesy. And thy servants did strike him with the palm of their hands. Jesus was taken to the house of Caiaphas, where the teachers of the law and the elders were assembled. Such a meeting of the Sanhedrin at night was actually illegal. However, in this case, it was required that witnesses be found who could support the accusations made against the accused. They needed 2 or 3 for the word to be established. The Sanhedrin had been quickly called together to conduct this trial and had no opportunity to prepare witnesses. So many false witnesses brought testimony. Testimonies had no weight because they couldn't get 2 or 3 to agree. The only statement supported by that was required with the number of witnesses was the false testimony that Christ said, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days I will build it another, not made by man. Jesus was not referring to the man-made temple whenever he makes this claim. He's referring to his body as the temple of God. In desperation, the high priest sought to obtain a confession from Jesus himself. Are you going to answer? Since the accusations were not supposed to be witnesses, they were illegal. Christ remained silent and refused to incriminate himself. Then the high priest put Jesus under an oath, saying, I charge you by the living God, tell us if you're the Christ, the Son of God, the Blessed One. The high priest was fully aware of Jesus' claims of himself to be the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus said, I am, and upon hearing this, the high priest tore his clothes, which was actually specifically forbidden of a priest in the law of Moses. If he tore his the priesthood was over. And there was a transfer actually here from the priesthood of Aaron back to the priesthood of Christ. The priest gave his judgment that he spoke in blasphemy. This alleged blasphemy was witnessed by the entire Sanhedrin. The priest then asked the Sanhedrin to make a judgment, and they said that he was worthy of death. And as Peter was beneath the palace, there cometh unto them maids of the high priest, and one saw Peter warming himself, and looked at him, and said, aren't you with Jesus of Nazareth? And he denied, saying, I know not, neither understandeth what thou sayest. And he went out to the porch, and the cock crew, and the maid saw him again, and began to say to them that stood by, This is one of them. And he denied it again. And after a little while they stood by there again to Peter, Surely thou art one of them. Thou art a Galilean. Thy speech agreeth with thee. But he began to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man whom you speak. And the second time the cock crew, and Peter called to mind the words of Jesus himself, Before the cock crows twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. And when he thought thereon, he wept. Despite the warnings, Peter denied Jesus. Peter had confidence in himself. Peter separated himself from Christ and followed him only at a distance. Peter sat in the company of Christ's adversaries. And he made 3 denials: the maids of the high priest, the servant girl that followed Peter in announcement, and those who heard the servant joined in. The rooster crows. Peter remembers and begins to weep. What a story. What a story. It amazes me that Jesus basically called them all out. He said, one of you is going to betray me. The rest of you are going to leave me, and one of you is going to deny me. Everyone that Jesus poured into for the past 3.5 years would walk away from him in his hour of need. But the beauty of this story is, we'll kind of get into this in a later chapter, these are the same exact people that Jesus gives another chance to, because that's what he does. He gives us another chance. Hope that you enjoyed this Bible study today, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.